A racist cop rots in prison for life after pulling gun on black general at funeral. Wait. Let me ask you a question. How could a man sworn to uphold the law become the very beast he pledged to destroy? The answer is not far-fetched. Before we dive into this extraordinary story, tell us, what city are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We love hearing from our global family. Don't forget to like and subscribe to keep this storytelling journey alive. Your support truly keeps us going. Now sit back, relax, and prepare yourself for a story that will stay with you long after it ends. In the pre-dawn hush of Greenwood Cemetery, the world held its breath. A pale sliver of light edged the sky, painting the horizon in bruised purples and muted blues. Dew-laden grass stretched between rows of headstones, each one a silent sentinel marking a life lived and lost. Among these markers, the flag-draped casket of General Marcus Hayes rested on a polished platform of mahogany, its surface gleaming like dark water under the dim glow of wreath-lit lanterns. The honor guard stood at perfect attention, rifles cradled in white-gloved hands, their chests rising and falling in steady unison. Mourners gathered in hushed clusters, faces etched with grief's raw geometry, tears carved lines into cheeks, knuckles whitened around program booklets that trembled in the morning air. Above it all, the wind stirred the hem of the general's flag, as though carrying one final salute from a grieving nation. Quiet reigned until a single trumpet note fractured the stillness. The bugler's breath caught in a staccato exhale, and taps drifted across the open field, funereal, haunting, and achingly beautiful. Each note was a measured step toward closure, an audible thread stitching together sorrow and reverence. Children perched against their parents' legs, eyes wide, clutching soft blankets, while elders bowed their heads, lips moving in private prayers. Friends exchanged solemn glances, memories flickering behind their eyes. The general's hearty laugh, the firmness of his handshake, the unwavering steadiness that had guided so many through the darkest of storms. A collective inhale rippled through the crowd as the last note died away, leaving behind an echo that seemed to linger in the marrow of every bone. From the periphery, Officer Roger Dalton entered the scene. His boots clicked against the flagstone path, each step a punctuation of intent. The uniform he wore was immaculate, navy shirt crisply ironed, badge catching the faint gleam of morning lanterns, utility belt snug around his waist. But in the taut set of his jaw and the narrowing of his eyes, there was something less than honor. A coil of resentment wound tight around his heart, hidden beneath the sheen of duty. To strangers, he might appear a model of professionalism. To those who knew the undercurrents of his past, he was a simmering vessel of prejudice, a man for whom rules applied only when they served his purpose. As Dalton drew closer to the casket, the mourners parted like a sea before a storm. He stationed himself behind the honor guard, head tilted slightly, surveying the assembled crowd. Beneath his calm exterior, a tempest raged. He saw the general's uniform, the medals that once caught the desert sun and the distant gleam of foreign battlefields. He saw the widow, Evelyn Hayes, standing with dignified grief at the casket's head, her posture straight despite the weight of her loss. He saw the little girl clutching her mother's hand, wonder and sorrow mingling in her wide, dark eyes. And in that moment, the hatred buried deep within him coalesced into a decision that would shatter a community's trust and ignite a firestorm of justice. Time slowed and stretched as Dalton reached back to the sling of his issued rifle. The strap snapped free with a muted report, sending a shockwave of alarm rippling through the crowd. The mourners turned as one, a collective intake of breath echoing across the grass. The bugler froze, trumpet raised to lips still parted in a silent gasp. Mothers shielded children's faces. Some wept openly. Others stood rigid, paralyzed by disbelief. The honor guard, trained to react with unwavering discipline, hesitated for the barest heartbeat, long enough for the world to fracture. In that pregnant instant, Dalton's arm rose, leveling the rifle at the flag-covered casket. His finger inched toward the trigger. The polished wood of the coffin gleamed with an almost mocking brightness, as if daring him to tarnish its solemn purpose. The last vestiges of dawn light traced the rifle's barrel, painting it with malignant intent. Mourners choked back screams. The bugler's eyes widened in terror. Then the crack of a single shot ripped through the cold air, ricocheting off a stone pedestal with shattering violence. A fountain of marble dust erupted, scattering like ghostly petals across the assembled faces. Chaos bloomed. The trumpet clattered to the ground, its metal body echoing the crash of bones. Mothers scooped children into their arms and bolted toward the gates. Friends stumbled over one another in frantic retreat, skirts and ties snagging on wrought iron. The honor guard finally snapped to action, rifles trained on Dalton, shouts of, "Drop it!" splitting the panicked din. In the cacophony, a single sob rose, raw and vulnerable, weaving through the shouts and thunder of boots on stone. Within seconds, backup officers swarmed the scene. Dalton's rifle clattered from his grip as he was wrestled to the ground, cuffs clicking with a finality sharper than any shot. His face contorted with rage and fear, eyes wild beneath the brim of his cap. But the world beyond the casket had shifted irrevocably. The funeral had been marred by an act of hate, an officer, sworn to protect, betraying his sacred oath at the graveside of a national hero. By midday, the video of Dalton raising his rifle had gone viral. News outlets splashed the footage across screens, slow-motion replays dissecting each moment, the strap snapping, the muzzle rising, the spray of dust. Anchors repeated the grim tableau as if trying to process their own disbelief. "Officer pulls gun on fallen general at funeral," ran the headlines. Civil rights leaders condemned his actions in fiery statements. Protesters gathered outside the precinct, banners aloft, "Justice for Hayes," "No racist cops, never again." The city's mayor issued a terse apology, acknowledging the deep wound inflicted on the community. Yet no words could erase the image of a uniformed officer pointing a weapon at a silent casket. Detectives moved swiftly. In a dimly lit interrogation room, Dalton sat silent, eyes flickering with defiance and confusion. The prosecutor's office filed charges within 48 hours: attempted murder, aggravated assault, hate crime enhancement. Flashing lights and sirens escorted Dalton through the courthouse steps, cameras capturing the fallen officer's descent into disgrace. He refused to speak to the press, offering neither apology nor explanation. His silence spoke volumes, an unspoken admission that the chasm between law and hate had become too vast to bridge. Weeks later, the trial began in a packed courtroom. Wood-paneled walls absorbed the hush of anticipation. The judge's gavel thundered, calling the court to order. Jurors took their seats, faces a blend of resolve and compassion. Standing in full view of the bench, Dalton wore an expression of icy resignation. His defense counsel spoke haltingly of underlying stress and a moment of confusion. But the prosecution painted a darker portrait, a pattern of biased behavior, documented complaints of excessive force, whispered slurs on the job. Testimony emerged of earlier incidents, an off-duty altercation at a late-night bar, an internal reprimand for disrespecting minority colleagues, witness statements describing a simmering hostility masked by a veneer of professionalism. One by one, witnesses recounted the events at Greenwood Cemetery, how Dalton's hand trembled as he lined up his shot, how the mourners froze in horror, how the bullet's echo trailed off into an accusing silence. The widow, Evelyn Hayes, rose to the stand with quiet dignity. Her voice remained steady as she spoke of grief, a grief sharpened by the realization that her husband's service had been besmirched by hatred at his own funeral. "He fought to protect every citizen," she said, "and in his final moments of honor, he was betrayed by the very uniform that was meant to uphold justice." Under cross-examination, Dalton offered little more than evasive glances. His defense attorney tried to coax an admission of remorse, but Dalton's eyes hardened. It was as if acknowledging guilt would fracture some final remnant of pride he clung to. The jury watched, silent and scrutinizing. In their deliberation room, they pored over evidence, the official police reports, the testimony of veterans who had served under General Hayes, video footage of Dalton's disciplinary file. They wrestled with the concept that an oath could be so tainted by prejudice that it became indistinguishable from violence. After days of tense deliberation, the jury returned. In the hushed courtroom, the foreperson rose. Every eye strained to catch a glimpse of the paper folded in her hand. "We, the jury, "Find the defendant guilty on all counts," she announced. The words echoed like the gavel's final blow. Dalton's shoulders slumped as the weight of condemnation settled upon him. A collective exhale rippled through observers. Relief, vindication, sorrow commingled in shared humanity. Sentencing followed swiftly. Judge Matthews, a veteran jurist known for both compassion and firmness, delivered the verdict: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Dalton's crime was not merely a breach of protocol. It was an act of racial hatred so profound that his continued freedom would undermine every principle his badge supposedly defended. Shackles clicked around his wrists, and he was led away through the narrow door that severed the world of daylight from the shadowed corridors of the penitentiary. In the days and weeks that followed, Greenwood Cemetery cleaned the fractured stones and replanted the lilies. The site of the shooting was cordoned off for investigation. Yet General Hayes's grave remained a place of pilgrimage. Veterans laid wreaths. Children painted pictures of his medals. Strangers knelt in silent prayer. A bronze plaque was mounted near the entrance, bearing his name and deeds. Marcus L. Hayes, soldier, leader, hero. 1950 to 2025. Underneath, an inscription. Justice may be delayed, but it shall never be denied. Inside the prison walls, Dalton confronted an existence he had only ever believed existed in nightmares. Concrete corridors stretched like endless caves. Bars etched shadows across his cell. The echoes of cell doors slamming and distant shouts became a constant refrain. In solitary confinement, he had nothing but his thoughts that cycled through regret, denial, and recrimination. He scribbled words on scraps of paper, apologies addressed to ears that would never hear them, prayers offered in silence to gods he no longer believed would answer. Outside, the city awoke to a renewed sense of purpose. Mayor Caldwell signed legislation mandating comprehensive bias training for all law enforcement officers. The police department instituted a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior, with robust oversight committees including community leaders and civil rights advocates. Scholarships were established in General Hayes's name, supporting young cadets committed to service and equality. A local foundation launched mentorship programs, pairing at-risk youth with veterans and law enforcement officers dedicated to positive change. At a community center, murals depicting scenes from Hayes's life sprang up, him leading troops through dusty deserts, embracing local children in foreign villages, standing proudly on parade grounds with his troops at attention. Beneath one mural, a plaque read, "Let his legacy teach us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." Children gathered there after school, their laughter echoing against painted walls, a testament to hope's resilience. Months turned to years. Dalton remained behind razor wire, watching seasons pass through a high, narrow window. He ate meals in silence, counted footsteps in the yard, endured the ceaseless hum of institutional life. Occasionally, letters arrived, requests for interviews, offers of legal appeals, messages from advocates seeking to understand the roots of his hatred. He read them with a detached curiosity, as though examining a relic from a life that belonged to someone else. Meanwhile, Evelyn Hayes channeled her grief into action. She spoke at universities, testified before legislative committees, and penned op-eds for national publications. Her voice, once trembling with loss, gained strength with conviction. She collaborated with former soldiers and civil rights activists to create the Hayes Commission on Justice, dedicated to investigating systemic bias within law enforcement and championing reforms that honored her late husband's ideals. On the anniversary of General Hayes's death, a ceremony was held at Greenwood Cemetery. Veterans in uniform stood beside community members, and the nation's colors flew at half-mast. A lone bugler played, taps, again, each note resonating with both remembrance and resolve. Evelyn placed a single white lily on the casket-shaped monument carved from granite, its surface polished by countless hands. The crowd bowed their heads, united in memory and promise. As the ceremony drew to a close, a hush settled over the gathering. Then, from behind the monument, a group of young cadets marched forward, raising their right hands in oath. They swore to defend the Constitution, to protect the innocent, and to uphold justice without prejudice. Their faces shone with determination, faces that would not know the taint of Dalton's hate, but would carry forward Hayes's legacy of service and equality. And so the story of hate's betrayal and justice's triumph wove itself into the tapestry of a community's history. It served as both warning and inspiration, a reminder that those who wear the badge must be more than enforcers of law, they must be guardians of humanity. It proved that one act of violence could galvanize a movement, spark a transformation, and restore faith in the promise of equal protection for all. If you believe in justice, if you stand against hatred, if you honor heroes whose lives illuminate the path forward, then join us. Subscribe now to We Are Black on YouTube. Together, we amplify stories that demand to be heard, we champion voices that refuse to be silenced, and we forge a future where every life is valued, every right is upheld, and every hero's legacy endures. Hit that subscribe button, and be part of the movement that ensures hate never prevails.